Hello guys, and welcome back to a new video here in Mickey Reaction. If you are new here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video. And now, let's get started.
Hi, my name is Mia, and I've had a bit of an unusual life. I live with my dad in the middle of nowhere. And look, I love my dad, but he's a bit of a weirdo. Even though we're miles away from civilization, he has cameras surrounding our property. He even has crazy motion sensors and these super high fences. I always assumed my dad was paranoid. I figured maybe he watched too many horror movies or something. I wasn't allowed to go to school, so I was homeschooled by him. It was like that for as long as I could remember. I don't know when we moved out into the middle of nowhere, and I had no idea what happened to my mom. My dad was always crazy, secretive, and strange. I didn't have any friends or family, and my dad was weirdly strict about social media. When I was 14, he caught me with a social media account. He ripped my phone from my hands, took it outside, and smashed it with a hammer. I mean, he was that strict. After that, I stopped trying to get social media accounts. I knew it would only get me in trouble. Luckily for me, I was allowed to have one thing: video games. I started playing this mythical war game. I played online with a bunch of other people. There was a guy who went by Dark Horse and invited me to join, and right away, I was in love with the world. I would stay up until the sun rose to talk to Dark Horse, battling demons and witches and taking over kingdoms. He made me laugh. I knew I wasn't supposed to talk to strangers, but I felt safe with Dark Horse. I felt like I really started to like him. Soon, it reached a point where I wasn't leaving my room for days. I was glued to the screen, afraid to miss a single part of the game and our campaign. I'm embarrassed to say this, but it reached a point where I was afraid to even go to the bathroom. I started using a bucket in the corner of my room. I know, it's gross, but my worry about being away for too long was so strong. My dad told me if I didn't start leaving the room, he was going to take my game away. I brushed him off a billion times. I told Dark Horse what my dad was threatening, and he started joking about getting rid of my dad. I laughed and joked around with him, but something in his voice kind of spooked me. One night, I was up playing at 4 a.m. with Dark Horse. Then, my door flew open. My dad stormed in and ripped the cable to my game out of the outlet, shutting it off. He told me I would get my game back when I earned it. I was so shattered. The next few days were like a living nightmare. I spent every single hour thinking about the game and thinking about Dark Horse. Would he be mad at me for disappearing? A few days passed and my dad finally gave me my game back, but with conditions. I was only allowed to play 2 hours a day. I tried to fight him on it, and he wouldn't budge. I was so angry, I slammed the door and stormed into my room. When I got online, Dark Horse called me within minutes. I thought maybe he'd be excited or concerned, but he was sobbing. He was crying, begging me to tell him where I went. He cried that he thought I was never going to come back. Looking back on that now, I shouldn't have been flattered, but I totally was. I told him I would never leave him again, but my 2 hours a day wasn't enough. Dark Horse told me he needed to talk to me more than that. When I told him I couldn't, he asked me why our love wasn't strong enough to go against my dad's wishes. I felt like I was being manipulated, and then he asked me to be his girlfriend. I accepted. Then, Dark Horse started to get less and less nice. He told me it was unfair that we were dating, and I hadn't really told him anything about myself. My dad has always told me not to give out my information, so we just went by screen names. When I told him I wasn't comfortable with that, he got upset with me for not trusting him. He told me if I wasn't comfortable telling him who I was, he didn't want to play with me anymore. My whole world froze. I couldn't lose video games. If I couldn't play the game anymore with him, what was I going to do for fun? I'd go back to having no friends and spending all day super lonely. So I caved. I told him my name was Liza, and I told him the city I lived in. On the other end of the line, he was excited. He told me his name was John, and he lived in the exact same city as me. But our joy was short-lived. My dad barged in the room, asking who on earth I was giving my information to. I panicked, not knowing what to say, and my dad ripped the headphones off my ears. He snapped them in his hands and screamed at me, telling me he had warned me not to give my information out. That's when I lost it. I told him he was terrible for keeping me locked away, and that he was crazy. He slammed the door and told me tomorrow we were taking all my video games, my system, everything, and throwing it away. My heart sank. I couldn't let that happen. I looked back at the screen and John had written me a message. Do you want me to rescue you? Send me your address. At that moment, I was so alone and afraid of the future. It was a terrible move, but I typed my address and sent it over to him. He typed back to pack my bags and said he'd pick me up at 3 a.m. That night, I tried to pack as quietly as I could. My dad came into the room at around 10 and asked if we could talk. I was so angry still that I told him I wasn't ready to talk to him. He walked away and looked really upset, but at the time, I didn't care. I was getting out of there. At 3 a.m., I tiptoed out of the house. I managed to sneak around the fences and the motion sensors. I stood at the end of the road in the dark, shivering. The whole thing was really spooky, and I started second-guessing myself. As I was about to turn around and go back home, I saw lights driving towards me. I realized it was John, and my heart skipped a beat. But then, my heart stopped. The car was old and beat up, with duct tape all over it. It was practically falling apart. When I saw John, I felt even worse. He was not the handsome guy I imagined. He looked like a total loser. He wore dirty clothes, and he seemed really, really creepy. Immediately, I backed up against the fence, trying to head back to the house. But John walked towards me. He started going on and on about his undying love for me and how we were meant to be together. My stomach started to turn. I couldn't even handle how he smelled. I told him this wasn't a good idea anymore, and I started running back to the house. I expected him to give up, but he followed me. He was running after me as I ran down the long dirt driveway. He yelled about how I didn't have to be afraid and he would take care of me. The motion sensor lights turned on, and immediately my dad was at the door. When he saw me running, he ran out and got between John and I. John started taunting my dad, saying that if he was out of the way, John and I could be together. Then they started fighting. I couldn't watch, so I ran into the house and dialed the police. I could hear them screaming and hurting each other out the window, so I ran into the closet and hid. My heart was pounding. The police said they would be on their way and would be there soon. But honestly, I didn't think they could be there soon enough. Then I heard heavy footsteps coming into the house. John started saying we could be together now, that he had taken care of my dad. I was shaking and crying in the closet, trying to hide behind clothes. What did he mean by take care of him? How badly did he hurt my dad? I tried to stay quiet, but my crying was too loud. The more he talked, the louder I got. I gasped for breath, trying to hold back my tears. And that's when I heard him say, "I've got you." I covered my mouth as the door I was behind creaked open. He stared directly at me, smiling with a creepy smile. It seemed like it was all over. I tried to push myself back in the closet, but he reached for me, trying to grab me. I screamed for help. And that's when I heard the police barge in. He made eye contact with me as an officer grabbed him, putting him in handcuffs. I watched with tears in my eyes as they dragged him away. The police said that my dad needed to go to the hospital because John had hurt him. I rushed out and rode in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. My dad was hurt, and I felt horrible. I knew it was all my fault. Absolutely all of it. My dad had to stay overnight in the hospital. I paced in the waiting room all night, and in the morning, I finally got the news that he was okay. When I went in, my dad asked me to explain everything that happened. I confessed from beginning to end. That moment, my dad had something to confess as well. He said in a shaking voice, "I think it's time you know what happened to your mom." My heart started racing. Your mom had a pure soul, just like yours. She always saw the best in people, and that was the reason that led to her death. I couldn't bring myself to tell you because it was so tragic, but I owe it to you. Your mother had passed away in a horrible car accident. She was running away from a dangerous man. That man was not a stranger, it was someone she knew. She had reached out to him through a fundraising ad online that claimed to help sick children. When your mom saw the ad, not only did she decide to donate money, but she also contacted him and promised to help him with his mission. After a while, she found out that he was running a scam, and when she decided that she was out, he began stalking and blackmailing her for money. She was too scared to even call the police, and she kept it a secret from me, until one night, she broke down and told me everything as she was driving back home. But then she started screaming when she saw him in the car behind her, and he started chasing her on the road. I told her to drive as fast as she could, but she was panicking and ended up smashing her car into a huge truck on the road. She didn't survive, and the man disappeared. That day, I failed your mom. I couldn't protect her as I should have, and I promised myself that I would never let this happen to you. You're all I have left. I hugged my dad while we both sobbed. I promised my dad to be more careful, and he apologized for being overprotective and keeping me locked away from everyone. As for John, the police explained to me after that he was mentally ill, and that he had a history of stalking people online. I was horrified to know that. John was going to sit in a mental institute with no video games for a long, long time. Now, I'm in school and I have a lot of friends. I still play a ton of video games, but I'm really careful about who I give my information out to now. You can't trust everyone after all.
Oh yeah, this is true. This was a great story. If you like it, guys, don't forget to subscribe and like this video. And now, see you later.